I was born in Dublin in 1916, but of English parents. Both my father and mother were English. They met in Belgium at the beginning of the 1418 war, and he took her out of there when the Germans came into Brussels and took her back to his home in Dublin. So they were married there, and I was born in 16. And I lived there till I was about 10 or 11. And then my father sent me over to live with my grandmother in Liverpool so that I could be taught in a school in Liverpool in English. And I went through elementary school, secondary school, got my matric, did some evening classes in electrical engineering, got a job eventually in Liverpool with a telephone firm, Ericsson Telephones, and then the war came and I volunteered. I had to get permission from my firm because it was a reserved occupation, but anyway they let me go for aircrew, and I got in then in 1940 on a delayed service, but I was called up in July 40, got into uniform then, and went through courses at Blackpool, wireless courses, and then eventually navigation courses. I volunteered for navigation, and eventually joined a squadron on Blenheims down in South Wales. I had my first tragedy then when a school friend of mine who joined up with me was shot down over Norway. And that was the first time I lost one of my friends in the war. But anyway, I went on from there to join bullfighters, and we were taken down to Cornwall to fly out to the Middle East. But we had a crash on takeoff. My pilot went into hospital. I was all right, and I was transferred with the squadron to Wattisham in Suffolk. And then while I was there, I got a new posting, which of course thrilled me to bits, onto a mosquito squadron at Benson. And I was very much envied by all the rest of the squadron because I'd been picked out for the mosquitoes. And it turned out it was a PRU, a photographic reconnaissance unit. And I teamed up with a New Zealand pilot, Freddie Mackay, and we went on from there. It was the fastest aircraft in the Air Force at the time, and we did 20 ops, and the last one was over Austria, and we had engine trouble, and we had to cut one of the engines out and fly home on try and get home on one engine. And we got as far as Belgium, which was a long way, but we ran out of petrol. So Mac, being the sort of bloke he was, said, "You get out and try and get away, and I'll take the plane on," because it was still flying. We didn't have any training. We were told how to pull the ripcord and count to 10, and that was it. And when I jumped out, we'd got a bit low because we had lost height all the way back. And when we got over Belgium and Mac said, "You bail out," I shook hands with him, bailed out, but I didn't count to 10, I counted to 3 and then pulled the ripcord. Extraordinary thing, because 1 minute you're in an aircraft full of noise, engine noise, and next minute you're in silence, drifting down under this parachute, which was quite exciting really. It didn't bother me, and I landed quite easily, no problems there. Hid the parachute in a hedge, looked around to see if there was anybody about, and there wasn't. A few cows in the field, so I got out of the field and I saw a light in a shed in a farmhouse, and I approached it very gingerly and looked in the door, and there was a farmer and his wife milking the cows. This would be about 5:30 in the evening, winter's evening. It was December, and it was nearly dark, not quite. And I went in and said who I was. I said, "Did you hear the plane go overhead?" They said, "Yes." I said, well, I just jumped out of it. I explained this in French. I had enough French to explain that. And I know the first thing she did was offer me a drink of cow's milk that they'd just, you know, and I thought, well, this is a good sign anyway, so they're on my side. So then I said I'd like to get to Brussels, because I knew Brussels. I'd visited it before the war with my family. And they said, well, you need to go to Enghien, where there's a railway station, you see. I said, which way is Enghien? So they pointed it out, and I set off walking. Of course, it was getting dark then. And I had some, what they called escape boots on. You could cut the top of them off, and then they looked like shoes. So I did that and left them. And the farmer's wife wanted to know where the parachute was, you see. She was interested in the silk. And the farmer said, no, leave it there, we'll find it in the morning. He said, you never know who might be looking for it, might have seen it come down, you see. So I left then and set off walking, and I walked most of the night. I think I called in another house I saw, and yes, I did, and they gave me some food. I told them who I was, they gave me some food and told me how to get to Enghien, which was where the railway station was. And I carried on there until I found Enghien, and it was lit up very much with, it was German occupied, and I didn't want to go into the town at night, so I found myself a little outside toilet outside a cottage, and I spent the night there. And next morning I thought I'd get up early and go and knock at the door, and I did, and they were very frightened and said, oh, go away, we can't do anything for you. There was a young chap and his mother, and they were very frightened of me appearing. They didn't know who I was. So then I left and went to the church, asked for help there, and he couldn't help me, the priest. And eventually I walked out of the town and found this little railway cottage and got help from them. I got on the train and went to Brussels. If I hadn't had the French, I'd have been probably picked up very, very quickly, you know, but I had enough French to get by. I could go in a cafe and order a beer, and I bought a newspaper and sat reading it, pretending to read a French newspaper, you know. And and in Brussels, of course, I just merged with the crowds. I walked around Brussels and I got very tired, and I eventually bought a ticket to a theatre. I went in the theatre and fell asleep up in the gallery. Had a good sleep in the theatre until the play was over, and then I went out with the rest of the crowd and wandered about, and I was getting a bit nervous then of how to spend the night. And that was when I went to this place I remembered in Brussels, and of course went the wrong way on the tram and finished up with Maurice.
So what else did you have in the way of escape kit that had been issued by
I had a little compass, I had a little saw, I had a silk map. It was like a handkerchief, but it had a map on it of Europe. I had some Belgian, French, and I think German coins. We all had a few coins, and we had a little escape food kit. It had, I think it was some kind of food tablets in it and chocolate, and I'd eaten that, of course. And I left my escape kit with Alex, that was in the little cottage, and I got that back from him 60 years later, and I still have that compass. And I had a little Maltese cross on my jacket, and I left that with him. And I got that back from him 60 years later too. It was an extraordinary thing, was that. They kept them all the years, all those things I'd left with them, and the map.
But,
yes.
But obviously you say you had some coins, so that enabled you to buy a beer and buy a paper. And that.
Yeah, well, I had enough Belgian coins to do that. They offered me money, but I had enough. I didn't take any money. But they did give me some food, which I needed, of course, and a drink. You get very thirsty. It's something that you don't think of. Hungry you can do without, but you get very thirsty, and it's very difficult to manage. We were in the farm, and we were there the next day in the farm by the Pyrenees. You could see the Pyrenees from the farm. We were quite close to it. And this was the start of the crossing of the Pyrenees. The guide used to take you over at night and had to cross this river, which was very much flooded. So he left us to stay that night, and he was going to pick us up the next day. He was a very famous figure, was that the guide. He was called...
Was that Florentino?
Yeah, Florentino, that's right. Anyway, the next day at midday, we heard a noise of traffic coming. We said, what's all this, you see? And it was German troops arriving. Apparently, some little local farmhand had given the game away, for money of course, to the Germans in Saint-Jean. And they sent a couple of wagons up with troops and surrounded the farm. And we heard these, we were upstairs in one of the bedrooms having some cheap bread and cheese or something. I remember I had a little table knife in my hand, and the door suddenly opened. In fact, I said, here come the Gestapo, big joke, you know. And the door opened, and in came the German soldiers, a machine gun pointing at us. And I remember putting that knife down very slowly and carefully and putting my hands up. And we all did, the three of us, and Dédée, she was with us as well. And they took us downstairs, stood us up against the wall, threatened to shoot us. We were all in civilian clothing. We all had false papers, which they took off us. And they were going to shoot us as escapers, evaders, whatever, and saboteurs, they called us saboteurs. And one of the chaps pulled out his dog tags, as they call them, his RAF identification tags, and said, we're RAF, you see, the three of us. So they didn't shoot us then. They said, oh, well, we'll take you down for interrogation. So they marched us down, and Dédé as well, down to Saint-Jean, where we were interrogated very roughly. We were banged about and told not to tell lies and so on and so forth. Then we were shoved into prison in Bayonne, and we were kept apart. I was in solitary confinement for about 4 months. How I kept my sanity, I don't know, but I did. And we were nearly starved. They just about kept us alive. I remember we used to have soup once a day, and that was all the main meal. We had coffee in the morning, coffee at night, and soup at midday, and that was it. That was all you got. Sundays, I think we had a little bit of meat in the soup and a bit of bread, but most of the time we were just thought of nothing but food. And of course we were taken out of the prison, sometimes in the middle of the night, and interrogated by the Abwehr, not the Gestapo, the Abwehr, which was the German intelligence, a part of the army. And we were very roughly treated. I was beaten up a couple of times. And my friends were, I saw them on a railway station. One of them had been beaten up too. I got a black eye, I remember. I remember Dédé seeing me on the station. We were taken to Bordeaux, I think it was, yes, by rail. And she was on the station, and she saw my black eye, and she sort of did this, you know, stuck her finger up, said, you know, keep your pecker up, sort of thing. She was marvellous, absolutely. She didn't give a damn for the Germans. She treated them like dirt. She just hated them. Anyway, we had a bad period in Bordeaux, in prison there. It was just the opposite. Instead of being in solitary, we were shoved in a cell with about 8 people, which should have only had 2 in it. We slept on the floor. There was rats and mice and things, and it was horrible. And the smell was disgusting. I have an idea they put us in there. They probably had somebody in who was a stooge and tried to sound us out and get information from us, which we didn't. I didn't tell anybody. But I never saw the other 2. We were kept separate all the time. We never, except when we were taken in and out of the prison. That's the only time we met them. And then they took us back to Bayonne for another spell of solitary and questioning. And eventually they took us up to Paris, the 4 of us. And we were put in the prison of the famous prison in Paris. Oh, what's the name of it now?
Well, not the Gestapo, not the...
Yeah, that was run by the Gestapo, yes, yeah. Yeah, that was a horrible place.
And presumably, I mean, the information they were trying to get out of you wasn't so much to do with your RAF work or your mission on
No,
that,
it
but
was,
it was the escape
yeah,
line.
yeah, it was all about the Comète Line, which I knew very little about. You know, I mean, I was only with them for a couple of days, maybe a week altogether. And of course, all the names they used were false ones. You know, Dédée wasn't her proper name, and Nadine, that was a false name. I didn't see Nadine, but there was some people in Paris I met, and they had nicknames. They all used these nicknames, code names. And going down on the train, Franco was the only one I knew. I knew it was her father. I didn't know his name. I didn't know her name, or Dédée, but she was just Dédé's father. So we hadn't very much to give away. But they were very intent on finding out where I'd stopped in Brussels, which eventually they found out because stupidly I'd kept the address in a pocket in my uniform, and they found that. And poor old Morris was arrested and sent to Germany, and the family were arrested too. I found that out later. At the time I didn't know anything about it, but they kept me in Fresnes was the name of the prison. Kept me in Fresnes until May 1943, so I was in their hands for 4 months. And eventually some German Luftwaffe officers came to see me and started questioning me about my RAF, whatever I knew about my squadron, you know, because I wouldn't tell them that. And I was sent then eventually to Luft for prison camp. And of course we were questioned there about squadrons, and they knew more about the squadron than I did. They knew who ran the squadron and where it was based and all sorts of things. They even showed me photographs they'd taken, that we had taken. They got very annoyed because I said, I praised the photographs. I said, they're very good photographs, aren't they? He said, no, we do better than that, he said.
Makes you wonder how the hell they got hold of those.
Yeah, I don't know how they got hold of them, but they did. They weren't my photographs, I know that. We'd taken photographs, but what Mac did when he crashed the plane, of course, they all went up in flames, so they weren't able to find any. He bailed out all right, but he got caught within about 2 days. Now, he was sent to prison camp almost straight away. I never saw him again until the very end of the war, when we met in a rehabilitation camp on the way back for about half an hour. And he went back to New Zealand and I went back to England. So I never met him again. A great bloke, yeah.
At least you discovered that you both survived anyway.
Yeah, we both survived, yes. Yeah. Yes, he went back home and got married, and I went back home.
So, I mean, when did you sort of first become aware that you were dealing with this organised, I mean, you obviously didn't know it was the Comète Line, but I mean...
Comète Line.
Yeah.
The first time was when the girl came to the flat where I was, Morris's parents' flat, and questioned me. And then I had to wait a few days before they took me from the flat, and I said goodbye to them, and went then and stayed with the Comète Line. Yes, and they fixed me up with clothes, forged papers. What they used to do, a couple of girls would come and take you into town, and we'd go to the Bon Marché, and you'd go to one of these photo machines, and we'd all laugh and giggle, and you'd have your photo taken. You said it was all for the forged papers, but it was made to look like we were having a good time together, you know. It was really wonderful the way they organised it. And then we had these forged photographs on the forged documents. I was an electrician. They asked me what I was. I said I'd been electrical work, so they made me an electrician. A French one, of course. I forget my name, but I had this forged pass.
So, how did you feel about leaving Morris and his family, and how did they feel about saying goodbye to you?
Oh, it was very sad, and of course they said, be very careful what you say, and I said, oh yes, I wouldn't say anything, but it's easy to say, but it's not easy to do, you know. I made several mistakes and gave things away. I always regret that, but...
And so just describe again your mode of transport then from leaving Brussels.
Well, by train, always by train, yes. They took me to I think we went by tram to the place where they kept us. I met some other RAF people there as well. Can't remember who they were, but we were taken in small batches, you know, and I was taken on my own to Paris. There was nobody else with me, I don't think. And then in Paris, I met up with the other two. They were in other places. They weren't with me. I was on my own with this family that looked after me. And then they took us to the station where I met the other two, and I met Dédée, her father, and Franco at the station. And there was a very clever move was this. They reserved a first-class compartment, which meant that nobody else could go in it, so that you couldn't give yourself away to anybody, you know. It was a very clever move, was that. And then when the inspectors came round, they just told you to show your ticket and your pass, and that was it. It was quite clever the way they did it. But we were told to keep quiet, of course, and just say yes, no.
Although your French was actually pretty good.
Well, my French was good enough to get by, anyway.
So did you realise when you first met Dédée sort of how important she was in the whole organisation?
No, not till after we were caught. No, I didn't. See, I only met her at the train. We went down that night. She was with her father, talking to her father and Franco. Didn't speak to us much at all until we got to the farmhouse, and then she told us that we would be going over the frontier with this guide, and she would come with us. She always went with
Florentino.
Florentino.
So God,
he was caught, but he got away. He was shot actually, and whisked away by friends, and they never caught him.
What, in the same incident?
No,
at the same time?
no. Later on, he kept taking people over. Later on, he had to drop it for a long time because of the whole organisation had to be reorganised. You know, it had to be people were caught, and the whole thing sort of came to a shuddering halt. You know, and then they picked up again and carried on. Franco especially, he took charge, and several people were caught and shot and imprisoned. The women were in prison, the men were shot.
But Nadine was okay. I mean,
Nadine had a terrible time, but she came through it. She was in several very bad prisons.
And was she caught as part of the backlash from you?
Yes, I think she was, yes. Later on, yes. They kept going as long as they could, but they got into the organisation, and obviously they got people to talk. They tortured people, and some could stand it and some couldn't. And they eventually caught up with a lot of people. Franco they never caught. He got away with it.
All you can really hope is that people hold out long enough for the other people to protect themselves.
Yeah. They passed the word around, of course. Everything shut down, you know, they did nothing for a long time. And then they got it going again. Her father was caught, and he was shot just before the end of the war. And I only saw him the once. He was supposed to come over with us, but he was an old man, and because of the bad weather, they decided not to take him, and he went back to Paris, where he was based. And he carried on then for a while. After she was caught, he was very worried about her, of course. They tried to get her out of prison, but failed. They kept moving her around. She didn't keep her long in one place. They even formulated a way of getting her out of this prison in Bayonne where we were, but they'd moved her somewhere else, and they couldn't get her out.
They obviously realised.
All sorts of things went on.
Yeah, so it is, as I said to you earlier, it is amazing, isn't it, this incredible contribution that people of Belgium made, that a lot of people in Britain just don't...
They just don't realise, no. They were risking their lives the whole time. And some of them were quite young, you know, young people. And there were older people as well, but whole families sometimes went, you know, helped people and risked a whole family, yeah. They're wonderful people. I've met several of them since that survived, you know. Wonderful people. Well, my war was, I always say, in two halves. I really enjoyed my war, my flying, and then all of a sudden it stopped, and I was a prisoner and a prisoner of war, and everything went haywire. Yeah, terrible. I had a rough time as a prisoner too. Yeah.
Yes,
I was on the Long March at the end of the war for 3 months in the
well, yes, I
winter.
didn't ask you about it. Maybe you'd like to talk about that. I mean, so once you got to your final, place of imprisonment, I mean, maybe you could talk a little bit about that and what that was
Well,
like.
that's
Maybe you
another
don't want
story
to.
altogether. I was in 3 camps. The first one wasn't too bad. The second one was way up near Memel, way up near the Arctic. It was very cold. And they got us down from there. They took us by ship down the Baltic, stuffed in the hold of a ship for 2 nights. That was horrible. About 2,000 of us in this ship. And then when we got out, we were very roughly handled by a chap. He ran us what they call the run up the road. We were attacked by dogs and guards with bayonets, and lost our kit and landed up in a camp sleeping on bare boards. A lot of us wounded with bayonet wounds and so on. We had a very rough time. And then at the end of it, we were moved again, and in February the 2nd, we were marched out of the camp, and we marched until the 2nd of May. On the road the whole time, in the open, in barns and hedges and all sorts of weird places.
And how many of you?
Oh, a couple of thousand of us. We lost 1 or 2 on the way. We lost a few. They fell by the wayside.
And where were you heading to then?
Well, they marched us to the west, and then they marched us back again, and they didn't know what the hell to do with us. All their instructions were, keep the prisoners as long as you could. That was Hitler's instructions. He wanted us as hostages, I think. Wouldn't let us go. They should have left us in the camps to be freed by the Russians or whoever. In the end, we were freed by the British because we marched west, and they came towards us, and it was the Second Army, I think, freed us. Lüneburg, on Lüneburg Heath. And I wanted to get to Brussels, and I couldn't. And my friend that was with me, that went all through prison camp with me, he got to Brussels. He got in a car and went to Brussels. And I was taken home, and I was home inside a week. I was released on the 2nd of May, and I was in England on the 10th of May, 11th of May, my birthday. I kissed the ground when I landed.
So, where were you when you heard about, when did you hear about D-Day, and when did you hear that the war in Europe was over?
Oh, we were, well, D-Day was what, May the 8th. We were still in Germany.
June the 6th, 44 was D-Day.
Yeah. We were released on the 2nd. The German guards disappeared, and we were let loose, and then we were picked up a couple of days later. We were told to sit tight, and then we were picked up and taken back. And we were still somewhere in Germany on the 8th of May. And then I got home to the Midlands on the 10th of May.
I was thinking more the previous year though. In terms of D-Day, did you get word of D-Day? Where were you when?
Sort of. We didn't celebrate much, you know. For us, the war was over on the 2nd of May. We were free men. We didn't care what happened. We didn't care whether the war carried on or not. We were free. That was all that bothered us.
Yeah. No, but I was thinking of the previous year when the D-Day invasion happened in Normandy.
D-Day.
Yes.
D-Day. I mean, we did celebrate that.
And where were you when you heard about that?
I was in prison camp still then. And the word came through on our secret radio. And we were told, keep it quiet. Don't let your feelings run amok, because the Germans would have retaliated, you see. They would have known we knew then. So we had to keep it amongst ourselves, you know, but we really celebrated that. And when it came on the German news, we were able to let it go then, you know. The Germans told us the next day, it came on their news.
And you had to act surprised?
And of course they told us that they would throw us back immediately, you know, we'd never get anywhere. We said we just kept that to ourselves, and we were fingers crossed, you know.
And which camp was that that you were in? Can you remember?
D-Day. Oh dear, I suppose that would be in Gross Tischau. I was there at the end. Yes, that would be June. Yes, I was probably in Gross Tissue. That was Luft 4. I was in 3 camps, Luft 1, Luft 6 and Luft 4. Yeah, that was in Luft 4.
But
That was up near Stettin, somewhere up that way. Actually, from there, we saw the raid on Peenemünde. That was quite near us. We saw the RAF bombs going down and all the anti-aircraft going up. We saw that raid in the distance, of course. Yeah, we were about no more than about 25, 30 miles away. Yeah.
A lot of cheering going on that night.
Oh yes, you did. Cheered like mad. You had to be very careful how you cheered and when you cheered, but we did it. And we celebrated in our own way. We had our own drinks.
But I suppose that the thing is, even once the invasion of Europe had happened in that fixed.
Oh, we made bets then on how long it would be. You know, we used to. Our currency was cigarettes, of course, and we had bookies, you know, and we used to take bets, you know. I'll pay you back after the war, you know.
But I suppose the German, I suppose Hitler, just presumably that all the prisoners of wars could potentially be bargaining chips if it really came.
Yeah. They stopped after the 50 prisoners were shot. You remember that occasion after the Great Escape? They posted a notice in the camps that escaping was no longer a sport. If you got out of camp, you could be shot on sight. And it more or less stopped it. It did. I mean, it wasn't worth it. If you're going to be shot, what was the point in escaping? You wanted to get home. So it was, the camp leaders more or less shut it down. They said, no more.
Where were you exactly when
We're in Lüneburg Heath, somewhere up that way, yeah. Northern Germany, yeah, just north of Berlin. And that's where they signed the peace treaty on Lüneburg. Well, we were back in a holding camp then. They moved us back by lorry to a holding camp where we were deloused and refed and given you fresh uniform and everything, you know.
And did the British Army literally come to the camp gates and physically open them? I mean, is that how it happened, or was it more?
Well, the RAF took us over. They looked after us, not the army. Yeah, and the RAF then released a whole lot of bombers to bring us back. Sent them over there and loaded them up with all the ex-POWs who were standing up coming home all the way home. Stuffed us in the planes.
I was thinking more of the physical moment, though, when you knew you were being released. I mean, was it literally a case of British soldiers coming to the...
Oh, yes, yeah. They threw food for us. That was the first thing they did, was give us rations. And we ate the bread, and we all said this, it was a sort of expression we used. The bread, it tasted like cake to us, because we'd been on brown German bread, which was horrible stuff. And we got this beautiful white bread, you know, it was just like cake. And of course we had our spam and all that sort of stuff, dried egg and, you know, all the usual rations. We went to town, we killed some chickens and cooked them and had a ball.
And had the German sentries sort of faded away when they knew...
Oh, absolutely, just faded away. Never saw them again, no. And the next day, they said, sit tight. The next day they came in and took us back, had lorries for us, you know, they organised lorries to take us back to a holding camp. And the first thing they did, I always remember this, they fed us, of course, and they had a canteen, and you went and helped, you know, got in line and got served, and the line never stopped, because as soon as you finished, you went back and joined the end of the line again, until all the food ran out. They said, sorry, there's no more food, you've eaten it all. I always remember that, yeah. Got second helpings, as long as it lasted.